hesitation, we head to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line at 205-342-9904 and check in with our good friend Brent Beaird, who I know Brent knows DK Metcalf is out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's a real blow for Ole Miss. It's not that they don't have any more receivers, but you lose a guy like that, he's a game changer, so that certainly hurts them. And Trev, I think it may be less that they're confident in Ole Miss and more that they just don't trust Auburn.
Yeah, and as bad as Auburn has been on the ground so far this year, incredibly bad under when you talk about the Gus Malzahn years, either as a coordinator or the head coach at Auburn, I think people still look at this Ole Miss defense and think if there's a week where Auburn can get it right on the ground, this might just be it, right?
Well, and I think the other question is, Trav, how much can Boobie Whitlow play? And again, they really do not have really a set tandem in the backfield. So that and after Kerryon Johnson left, they have struggled with that through the spring and fall practice, and it continues going through the game. And obviously what Malzahn needs is a quarterback who's a primarily running back, and he certainly doesn't have that in Stidham, does he?
No, he does not. And, where the Metcalf loss really hurts Ole Miss, not just in this game, but for the remainder of the season, is that with Metcalf, a lot of the things Tennessee was able to do in the passing game last Saturday at Auburn, Ole Miss could do this week against Auburn in Oxford. But without Metcalf, that size, and you saw it time and time again last Saturday at Auburn. Jared Guarantano, especially on third down, I think nearly one half of his 321 passing yards against Auburn Saturday, Brent, came on third downs. Yep. And a lot of times it was as simple as three-step drop, bang, and he would just get it up against man coverage or one-on-ones, and his receivers, Callaway, Jennings, the rest of those guys, Palmer, they went up and made plays. Well, that's one less guy that can do that for Ole Miss this week, even with the depth they have, Brent.
Well, and nothing that was disturbing for Auburn in that game was, Trav, I'm sure you noticed how many times the Tennessee receivers were wide open, which and particularly on some of the scoring plays, and you got a guy like Jennings, he can go over and get a 50-50 ball, but no, that's point well taken. And again, when you're Ole Miss and you really can't run the ball, and everything is basically going on your passing game, that's an issue too for them. I mean, I can understand, but I will say this though, Trav, is there a point in that game where if it's a track meet, which Auburn does not want, but if it's a track meet, the thing I thought about this week, what's the cutoff point that Auburn really can't score above this? Is it 17, 21, 25? That's going through my mind in this game this week too.
I'm going to put, this might surprise some people, but I'll put Auburn's over under for total points Saturday against this Ole Miss defense at 27.5. I think Auburn's going to score some points this week. I think they will. And that's more about Ole Miss and the lack of quality personnel the Rebels have on that side of the ball. And so I think this is a game. I think this is a game in which Auburn's going to score some points. They're going to have to do it throwing the football though, because even with Ole Miss's issues on defense, what they do have are still two or three guys at the defensive tackle positions that can dominate what Auburn has right now at its interior line positions. And so from that standpoint, it could be that Auburn doesn't exactly run wild for a change in this game. But it's still Jared Stidham, Darius Slayton, Seth Williams, the Tuscaloosa product. I think that's where Auburn's going to have to get it done if they're going to win this game this week. Now, Brent, when we look around the Southeastern Conference, I talked about it in the opening segment of the show. We all want to go ahead and start looking ahead to next weekend. With Florida, Georgia sitting out there, and also November the 3rd, which obviously shapes up as potentially a huge weekend. But there are some games this weekend for those 2 weekends to matter. That need to go the way of LSU, and in games like that'll go a long way in shaping those next 2 weekends, right?
Well, there's no doubt about that, and obviously the Mississippi State LSU game to me it stands out as much as anything else. State having the week off. Now, what Joe Moorhead was able to do was to make Auburn play within that box that he had with Fitzgerald at quarterback and Williams and in that running back core with Hill. Now the thing about it is, though, Trev, I'm not sure LSU allows them to do that and be able to control that game. But I watched LSU and Florida be able to dominate that game in the fourth quarter. And then LSU do just the opposite against Georgia. And I think it's a fair question to ask. Trev, which LSU are we going to see? I know they've been pretty consistent. Will we see the team that lost against Florida, the team that beat Georgia last week?
It's a custom-made matchup for the LSU defense.
Yeah,
because you're not going to do well. We said this against Auburn too, but what we saw from Mississippi State against Auburn, in my opinion, Brent, was more of a return to what Dan Mullen did with Nick Fitzgerald. He had 28 carries in the game. I mean, that's what Dan did with Nick Fitzgerald. I think ultimately what Joe Moorhead wants to be is more like what we see with Trace McSorley at Penn State. Yes, a run threat, right? But not a dominant piece of the run game, which is what Nick has to be. I mean, Fitzgerald has to be that guy. He hasn't thrown a touchdown pass yet in SEC play, has 2 interceptions. So, that's the problem for Mississippi State in this matchup. And it's kind of a sneaky game for LSU because everyone is looking ahead to 2 weeks down the road already. But in terms of the matchup, Mississippi State on offense doesn't have the receivers that can get separation from these LSU DBs, and then Devin White and that defensive front, they're made for a game like this. Mississippi State has to ugly this thing up, which to their benefit is the fact that LSU seems to be more than happy to do the same.
Well, they absolutely would, because they know they can win a game like that. Love Dave Aranda, the D coordinator for LSU, and he really showed again what he's capable of in the Georgia win. But you've got some of these guys who are emerging, like Christian Fulton, who had all the trouble with the NCAA at cornerback. Kerry Benson's playing well. You mentioned Devin White. I'm not sure White's blockable most of the time, Trav, but they're as good as anybody, I think, in what they're doing defensively. And listen, one of the more amazing stats that I've seen so far this year, LSU has 1,415 yards passing and 1,415 yards rushing. That's good as balanced as you can get, is it not?
Yeah, that's very balanced. And let me ask you this: more important grad transfer to LSU, Joe Burrow or Cole Tracy? And I know most people are just going to automatically say, well, Joe Burrow, but Cole Tracy's the first-team All-American at the midway point of the season, and he's the kicker. I mean, think about these games without this guy handling the kicking chores for the Tigers.
Well, he's given them some cushion. He's given them some league. He's tied it up. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's been as good as just about anybody. And Trev, I'll say this, and to go a step further, not only is it Cole Tracy, but listen, you could argue this year that Evan McPherson at Florida is certainly been one of their MVPs, can't you?
Oh, don't get the Alabama people started about McPherson. Fort Payne, Alabama native. Wasn't he
That's
SEC Special Teams Player of the Week again? Did I read that
right? Correct.
That's a couple of them for the Fort Payne, Alabama native, Evan McPherson, the true freshman kicker.
That's right.
At the University of Florida. Now, Brent, when we look at this Alabama situation moving forward with Tennessee on Saturday, a lot of talk, a lot of thought and opinion given to the situation, the status of Tua Tagovailoa at the quarterback position. I said it earlier in the program, going out there yesterday, watching media viewing periods, and after hearing him, Tagovailoa, and Nick Saban talk about the injury, on Monday, you kind of had a little bit of a skeptical eye about it, in that both said, look, I think he's better at this point in this week than he was last week. But I got to tell you, going out there yesterday, it's a very brief period of time, but I walked away thinking that maybe he does feel better this week than he did last week. I don't think anybody would have expected that, Brent, with 11:54 remaining in the third quarter Saturday night.
No, absolutely not. I mean, everybody was holding their breath, watching the game. And listen, he's a tough kid. I'm not sure he gets enough credit for his physicality and how tough he is, and those cleats getting caught in the turf the way they did. And obviously, if they can get through this game, he'll have a lot more time to rest after that. But one thing I saw, and look, Bama's going to win the game, but I salute Pruitt, and they're better, they're tougher, and Auburn got nearly 300 yards in the first half, but in the second half they had less than 100. And Pruitt has shown this consistently, and this is something Alabama fans need to be aware of, is the fact that he did it at Florida State when he was down here, also did it at Georgia. Jeremy makes some pretty good second-half adjustments, and we saw that against Auburn. And again, I'm not saying they're going to win the game. The thing I'm just saying is he has a good mind, does he not, for evaluating the first half, making some tweaks, and his team's playing better in the third and fourth quarter.
No, he's done an excellent job, I would say, of keeping his teams in it for as long as he can. Even the Georgia game a couple weeks ago,
that's right,
hung around for a while, and doing it with a couple of true freshman corners that are playing a ton on the back end. And he's going to have to be really good in the first half on Saturday, Brent, because as you know, Daniel Batuli, starting middle linebacker, out for the first half after the targeting penalty in the second half against Auburn. And then Jonathan Kongbo, the sort of jack linebacker, defensive end type, tears his ACL against Auburn Saturday, and he's out for the remainder of the season.
Well, yeah, and Kongbo made a big pick in that Auburn game, too. I mean, Kongbo is just one of these guys. They've been waiting on him for a while. He's got a lot of ability, and he just has never really shown that much. But he was coming into his own, and that's a tough loss for them. But I'll say this: Pruitt's who he is. There's no pretension for him. He'll tell you what he's feeling and just kind of go from there. But I'm with you. He's done a nice job. You'll see this team now beginning to take on his personality because, Trav, how easy would it have been at this point before that Auburn game for him to have lost that team and they just gave up the season?
Very easily. Very, very easily. We're talking with Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News on a Wednesday edition of Southern Fried Sports presented by Cartier & Lloyd Attorneys at Law and also Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. A topic we had on the program yesterday, Brent, wanted to get your thoughts on this. If you had to pick a second-team All-SEC quarterback today, who would be your choice?
Well, that's a good question.
Did we stun you with that one, Brent?
It certainly caused me to think somewhat. I could throw Jordan Tamu in there from Ole Miss is a possibility, but I think right now, despite the numbers that aren't great, but just what he's done all around, I would probably go with Joe Burrow. We didn't know what we had, but he's been a real leader for them. He's a tough kid. He can run the ball, and he's not going to have great stats, but Trav, did we have any idea they would be this good at the beginning of the year with him transferring in?
No, they're very much ahead of schedule. And you're right. You can look at the completion percentages and things like that. But in SEC play, he has accounted for 7 total touchdowns.
That's right.
He's done it some with his legs. I still think he takes far too many hits.
Yeah.
I like that he's a tough guy. I appreciate that. But, man, he exposes himself to some big blows. It would be hard to argue with Joe Burrow. I don't know if Jake Fromm's necessarily played his way out of it. Obviously, last Saturday in Baton Rouge wasn't his finest moment. But just in SEC play, and you look at numbers, here's one I came up with yesterday that just sort of blew my mind based on preseason expectations. Between Stidham, Drew Lock, and Nick Fitzgerald, your touchdowns to interceptions ratio is 4-11 combined in SEC play. Those 3
That's
guys
incredible.
have only thrown 4 SEC touchdowns this year,
Yeah.
and against 11 interceptions. I don't think anyone saw that coming back in the preseason. Hey, let's talk a little basketball real quick before we get out of here with you, Brent. SEC Media Days for men's hoops going on right now as we speak. The preseason predictions are out from the media. Alabama picked squarely in the middle of the pack at 7. I said it earlier in the show. I think, though, you could really take the top 7 or 8, maybe more so 3 through about 9 and put them in a hat. Yeah. And you might pull them out any number of ways and still be right at the end
Absolutely.
of the season. What do you think?
Well, listen, I've heard, Trav, that Tennessee may be the best team in the league. And I'm not sure they're getting the pub that they need at this point either. But no, I would agree with you. And look, we're hearing here that this Florida team is going to make a lot of noise with all that they've got coming back. But I have high expectations for this Alabama team. I mean, look, I know you can't replace Sexton, but this group is coming back and having the last year to be able to play together is going to be invaluable to them. I'm really excited about hoops. I think this could be, and amazingly, I've heard already from some from some folks that the SEC is certainly going to be in the top 3 league conferences in the country, and some people think that may be the best.
Yeah, I think there's the very real possibility of 9 teams making the tournament. That's ACC like in the golden eras of really? ACC basketball. And when you look at this Alabama team, Brent, specifically, obviously the loss of Colin Sexton will make his NBA debut tonight up in Toronto. But sort of checking them out a little bit this preseason and knowing what this team brings back, it may be as deep a team in terms of legitimate high-level SEC talent as we've seen around here in more than a decade or so.
Yeah, no question. And again, to me, it's I mean, we know they'll play good defense, but again, will their shooting be improved from what it was last year? And if it is, they might be looking at going a couple of rounds in the NCAA tournament this year.
Yeah, went around last year, won a game, went to the second round, ran into a little program by the name of Villanova.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, they're pretty good at basketball these days under Jay Wright up there in Philadelphia. Well, as always, Brent, always a lot of fun catching up with you. Always a lot of insight coming from Brent Beaird. We appreciate it. We look forward to catching up with you next Wednesday as you guys get ready for the world's largest outdoor cocktail party down there in Jacksonville.
First time they've both been ranked, Trav, since 2012. There's already more of a buzz this year than there is in quite a while. And I know I don't have to tell you this, but a lot of Gator fans, Trav, thinking they can win that game this year.
Yeah. Speaking of buzz, world's largest outdoor cocktail party is a week and a half away. There you go. Brent Beaird of First Coast News and College Sports Today. Always doing a great job with us here on Southern Fried Sports. Thanks, Brent.
My pleasure, bud. Take care.